Good day, spiritual artists. This is CJ Miller, your host, and I am so proud if you've made it this far because we are about to talk about chapter 8. I'll tell you what, I went out this weekend and worked in my koi pond, and I am wore out. I'm very tired and I'm dragging. And it takes a lot to get up and do this. So I imagine for you as well to check in and take this time to honor your spiritual artist and to doodle is an achievement. And so I just want to say thank you for continuing with me on this journey and applaud yourself right now. If you can reach back and pat yourself on your back and say, look at me, I'm doing this. I'm committing to my artistry. So here we go on chapter 8. Quote, you don't need another person, place, or thing to make you whole. God already did that. Your job is to know it. Maya Angelou. So, end quote. Chapter 8, Your Wholeness Revealed. I was taught from a very young age to be a people pleaser. I quickly learned that I gained favor with an extra treat or hug if I appeased my parents. As I grew, I learned to please my teachers and professors. I understood that if I could grasp my instructor's language and repeat information back to her using the same words, then I was rewarded with excellent grades and recognition. Unfortunately, many people are beginning to realize that good grades result from learning what the teacher wants to hear rather than the process of accruing knowledge. This habit can pull us from our spiritual center. Later in life, I maintained that people pleaser trait and applied it to my friendships and romantic relationships. It often caused problems with my long-term relationships because I was primarily concerned with their pleasure rather than making myself happy. I became a half, seeking another half to make myself whole. Naturally, this trait began to exhaust me both mentally and physically. As a people pleaser, I worked from the outside in, not from the inside out. Often, I would put their needs ahead of mine, leading to conflict and resentment, and producing separation between who I was and what I manifested. I had to unlearn this belief to become a spiritual artist. In The Seven Secrets to Healthy, Happy Relationships by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. and Heather Ashamara, they caution the reader with this advice. Quote, the real secret behind commitment in relationships is that it all starts with a commitment to yourself. Committing to ourselves is foundational because if we don't honor who we are, it is impossible for us to truly honor another. End quote. They expand this point further and explain that we must drop the idea that we need someone else to be complete. I especially love this quote from the authors. Quote, anytime you are seeking to complete yourself through being accepted by another, you are actually leaving yourself. End quote. When we persist with people-pleasing tendencies, we are leaving ourselves behind. We are disconnecting and leaving our spiritual selves out of the creative process. As spiritual artists, we must commit to ourselves first. We must remember to work from the inside out. Seeking the they lived happily ever after solution might be ideal in a fairy tale, but unfortunately, it's based on a faulty premise. If we believe that we are born missing half of ourselves, and our goal is to locate the other half in another person, thing, or career, we are following errant thinking. As humans, most of us are born into conditions and societal consciousness that emphasizes the importance of bonding and forming one intimate relationship for our entire lives. While this belief may be practical from a societal standpoint because it unifies families, property, and a village system, it's not the truth. Our primary relationship is one with a greater power. As children of creative intelligence, we are already whole and complete. I have learned as a spiritual artist that we must approach the canvas with a sense of wholeness. When we recognize our wholeness, we can uncover the whole of ourselves in expression. Law of attraction is based on the principle that like attracts like. If we desire prosperity, we must acknowledge the wealth that we already possess. Likewise, if we are to attract artistic expression that reveals the whole spiritual artist within, we must approach the canvas with conscious wholeness in mind. We must approach the canvas and the creative process with the acknowledgement that we are already whole individual expressions of spirit. In other words, if we approach the canvas with lack, we produce lack. If we approach the canvas with wholeness, we produce and express wholeness. When we approach the creative process, it reflects our inner consciousness. Several years ago, I had an interesting discussion with a friend who was raised in strong faith. We discussed my beliefs and I shared my ideas on the process of conscious presence, meditation, and connection with spirit. I explained to her that God resides within everyone, and when we create from that knowing, we operate from our true purpose. She appreciated my viewpoint, but her agreement stopped when I explained that God is within. She couldn't accept the concept that we are God interacting with God, or as Ernest Holmes claims, all that God is, I am. She insisted that God was a separate presence to whom we needed to pray for acceptance. We had to ask Jesus to be our Savior and come into our lives. I believe that this defies the logic behind the very powerful definition of all-powerful God. Based on the understanding that God is all-powerful, all-present, and all-knowing, spirit must be present in all things, plants, animals, humans, and even in the emptiness of space itself. We need not ask God into our lives, but simply acknowledge the presence of spirit that already exists within ourselves and within others. In any scientific argument, we begin with a basic, provable, universal truth or premise, and through trial and error, create an argument rooted in that truth. If this, then that. Based on scientific principles, if God is all-powerful, then God must maintain dominion over all things, both spiritual, physical, and yes, even human. God cannot be all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present if this power isn't contained in everything, including yourself. My friend had been taught by her religious community that God is something outside of herself, a power of which we need to seek approval and beg forgiveness. If that were true, then God's omnipotence would be limited and not all-encompassing. She had a dualistic mindset, and she's not alone. Many religious dogmas continue to affirm our separation from this creative intelligence. According to New Thought leader Ernest Holmes, many spiritual truths dispel the belief that we are broken or somehow missing our other half. Through these spiritual truths, we must remember that God is my source, and our first and most important relationship is with God. When we honor that relationship with God, we experience wholeness. We cultivate this relationship by knowing and feeling God's presence within. It's not something outside of ourselves that we need to find, but something within that needs to be acknowledged and maintained. As aspects of this wholeness, we possess the same characteristics of spirit, expansion, creativity, and infinite possibilities. According to Eckhart Tolle in Stillness Speaks, quote, I am not my thoughts, emotions, sense perceptions, and experiences. I am not the content of my life. I am life. I am the space in which all things happen. I am consciousness. I am the now. I am. End quote. It is from this knowing this that I consciously commune with spirit during the creative process. Our first relationship is with our spiritual selves, and from that starting point, we can then form relationships and romantic relationships with others. There's nothing wrong with desiring an intimate relationship. Relationships are an incredible source for exercising your spiritual expression. For everyone is an expression of spirit, and interacting with them is most rewarding. When we come from a sense of wholeness, we form happy, healthy, balanced relationships. With wholeness, we learn to walk beside each other on our own path because we're equal in spirit. One does not receive priority over the other. However, if we start with the errant belief that we need to find our values in others, we will be creating codependent relationships that will ultimately create friction. I'm going to read that again. However, if we start with the errant belief that we need to find our value in others, we will be creating codependent relationships that will ultimately create friction. As a spiritual artist, I realize that this core belief applies to the act of creativity and how I approach the canvas. Creativity is a process that flows from inside out. Before I pick up the brush, I must acknowledge that I am whole. I cannot approach the canvas to validate or prove my worth. I must start as whole. Wholeness is the starting point for a relationship with spirit, with ourselves, with others, and with the creative process. As I approach the canvas, it must be from this knowing so that I can reveal my spiritual truth and truly co-create. Wholeness wasn't an easy lesson for me. Like most of us, I learned to please my parents, teachers, and life partner. It was only through self-examination and a lifetime of lessons that I realized my spiritual truth. I am already whole. Before we approach the canvas or any creative project, we must practice the state of a spiritual artist. That conscious state includes acknowledging the spirit, the wholeness, the God, whatever you want to call it, within ourselves. Let's go back to that discussion with my dear friend. When I say that we are full expressions of creative intelligence, that doesn't mean that we are perfect or complete. It doesn't mean that we have no room for growth and improvement in our relationships and lives. Like spirit itself, we are continually expanding into more and more levels of creativity. Our artistic work will continue to grow with new tools, skills, and expression. We are not done by any means, but we are whole in spirit. It's only through conscious recognition of our wholeness during the creative process that we access the omniscience of spirit. Well, I love this chapter, and it's so critical and it's so important for me, it was to realize my spiritual growth as an artist. And I realized that I spent so many years of my life trying to validate myself. In fact, that's really what our whole society is based on, that need to validate yourself, whether it's by having the perfect body, by winning an award, by wearing the best clothes, by having a car, all those things that we're trying to attempt to somehow say, I'm broken. I'm broken and I have to fix it. I have to prove to others that I'm valuable. But I contend that God, spirit, creative intelligence sees and knows our value because we are of creative intelligence. We are part God. God is within everything. God does not make mistakes. And so when I was growing up, I had a realization that all things must somehow be fair in God. It's a weird concept, but I look around and you see how some people are born with so much, so many gifts, or it appears that they're born with so many gifts. And other people are born with less than, we think that are less than. But that's all our viewpoint, isn't it? It's how we're judging something else. I judge that because you are overweight, you are somehow less than, but there's a gift in everything, right? There's a gift in everything. So there's gifts in every single person. And whatever you're born with as and who, you have God within you. And it's God in such a creative, inventive expression. And that God might be coming in a big, bulky body, or that God might be coming in a short personality. But that doesn't mean it's limited. And so I realized that when I approached the canvas, sure enough, if I came to the canvas and I was trying to prove myself, my work looked forced. I was painting or drawing, trying to force something out of it, trying to make it. And it showed that. It didn't come from the joy and love within me. And I realized that when I came to the canvas, I walked into the studio and I took a moment to acknowledge that I am God, individualized and perfect as I am. There's no need that this is just fun. I'm just having fun. I'm creating in joy and love and peace. Suddenly, my paintings took off. They took off because God is flowing through me. And so God flowing through me, co-creating with me, the painting has the option to be anything it can be. Possibilities are endless. But when I came from lack, I was trying to force it through my limited vision, my judgments, my criticisms to be something that maybe God didn't even want it to be. Maybe spirit didn't want it to be. So I think it's important to reflect on this today. I want you to reflect on how you are already perfect and lovely just the way you are. Likewise, if you approach a relationship or a job or even a career or even a talent, thinking it's going to make you whole, it won't. Nothing makes you whole but your connection in knowing that you are already whole. So I thank you for following me on this. I'm looking forward to continuing on this journey with you. There's so much great things to discuss. You know what? A lot of people have been sending me their doodles. You can feel free to email me your doodles. I'll post them on Instagram, cjmiller at spiritualartisttoday.com. I love seeing what you're coming up with and just letting that subconscious flow as you listen. Have a great day and practice being a whole spiritual artist. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.